All right, so next we're going to talk about discrete and continuous data. So this is kind of a subcategory of the quantitative data coming from quantitative variables, right? So when we say discrete data, this means the data can take on one of a finite number of distinct outcomes. In other words, it's a limited or countable number of outcomes. Okay, so maybe there's only 5 different options or 20 different options or 3, right? That would be discrete data. Continuous data, the data can take on any numeric value within a particular range. So if I say how many numbers are there between 0 and 2, there's actually an infinite number because you can take your decimal places out as many decimal places as you want, and there's a gazillion infinite number of possible different numbers there. If I say how many integers are there between 0 and 2 inclusive, you would say 3, right? 0, 1, and 2. So that would be discrete, but if I say how many numbers, not integers, but numbers, that would be continuous data. The data can take on any numeric value within a range. Okay? So, for example, if I say, hey, the amount of nicotine in a particular Marlboro cigarette is 1.2 milligrams, we would say, okay, the data here is the 1.2 milligrams, right? Is that discrete or continuous? Well, first off, if it has a decimal, it's probably continuous, okay? But here, the amount of nicotine could be 1.2, 1.3, 1.25, 1.2, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth. There are an infinite number of options. So this is going to be continuous data. While this is a particular number, it could have been any of an infinite number of possibilities, okay? Now, if I say Mark spent 53 minutes on his homework last night, it's kind of the same story, right? Now, while, there is an upper bound on this, just like with the cigarettes, quite frankly. How much time could he spend on homework last night? Probably 6 or 7 hours worth, right? And that's a lot of different options. But also while this does only say 53 minutes, it could have said 53.5 or 53.26 or 54.71298. There's an infinite number of options. So this, again, there we go, is continuous data. Continuous data. Okay. What about if I said, hey, last semester 14 out of 18 of my students passed my differential equations class? Well, here, so the question, the variable being measured is how many students passed the class, right? And the possible responses would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 14, limited to integer values. And so this is going to be discrete data. So 14 is discrete data. And our quantitative variable would be how many students passed, right? We are limited to integers because you cannot have half a student, right? And almost always, when you're limited to integers, pretty much always, it's going to be discrete. Limited to integer values. Okay. I think I've got a few more here. What about the volume of water lost each day through a leaky faucet? So think about how much now. So this now we're thinking more in terms of a variable. So the particular data values, what values could they take on? They could take on anything between 0 and, thousands of gallons, right? And they could be decimals for sure. So this would be continuous. I don't know why I said discrete. Continuous data. What about if I said, hey, what's the number of sequoia trees in a randomly selected acre of Yosemite National Park? So we've got 1 acre randomly selected. How many sequoia trees are on that acre? There's no such thing as really half a tree, right? You're limited to integer values. So integers. So this is going to be discrete. What about the points scored in an NCAA basketball game? So kind of the same story here, right? You can't score half of a point. There's a limited number of points, between 0 and 150 or whatever the heck. You can't score, 50.5 points. So again, this is going to be discrete. It's a countable number of points that can be scored in a basketball game. I think we have one last one. Internet connection speed in kilobytes per second. And so again, it might be 30 kilobytes per second, 50 kilobytes per second, 1,052 kilobytes per second. But you could also have like 256.7 kilobytes per second. So we're not limited to integers here. We have an infinite number of possibilities depending on how exact we want to measure. This is going to be continuous data. Okay. And that's going to take us to levels of measurement, which we will put in its own video.